hello, welcome, and hotep everyone out there in the world of the internet or the cyber world. I go by the name of Baruti Libre. And this is the second episode of the Baruti Libre show, in which we're going to elucidate and celebrate the life of Nelson Mandela, Mabita Nelson Mandela, who was an internationally renowned political figure who was the first black president of South Africa. Now, through the national media, through mainstream media, we see him as just a huggable old figure. And as Cornel West coined it, the professor, Dr. Cornel West, the Santa Clausification of this revolutionary figure, when actually Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for 27 years for a political ideology that he believed in, which was social justice, which is actually the human rights of humanity, which is actually humans having the ability and also the freedom to pursue education, the freedom to pursue economic rights, the freedom to pursue entrepreneurship, the freedom to be themselves besides being discriminated against due to their phenotype. Because in South Africa, you had the Nationalist Party, which was in power, and they implemented a racialist system in which it was about white superiority and inversely black inferiority. So the thing is that based on the system of apartheid, which was implemented in South Africa once the Nationalist Party got elected in 1948, Nelson Mandela joined the African National Congress, which was a political party which was for the upliftment and self-determination of black people, but then again for social justice within South Africa. So he joined the defense military in 1952, which made him become very popular within that country. And at the time he was a lawyer, Nelson Mandela. So the thing is this, in 1960, we're going to fast forward, there was the Sharpeville massacre in which you had the black people in South Africa, and the majority of the tribes in South Africa who are black are the Xhosa, the Venda, and also the Zulu people. And the thing is that they were fighting against the discrimination that they were experiencing through all forms of society, whether it's through education, whether it's through economics, whether it's through labor, whether it's through any of the facets within society as a whole. And not only that, black people were being indiscriminately killed within South Africa. Black people were unemployed within South Africa. Black people were forced to work and weren't paid in South Africa, only to benefit the elitists within South Africa who were capitalizing off of the diamond and gold trade for the most part. So the thing is that during the Sharpeville massacre, you had a situation where 69 people were killed. There were 2,000 to 3,000 demonstrators. And the thing is that the ANC and various other political parties, like the Communist Party within South Africa, who had affiliations with the ANC, they realized that, for the most part, that revolutionary change could not occur through peaceful means. So the thing is that there were some people within the ANC who formed a faction called the Mkhante Busizwe, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And if you translate that, that's the spirit of the nation, in which it was the military aspect of the military wing of the ANC. And a lot of them assembled and they were located in the headquarters of Rivonia, South Africa. And what they did was organize various acts of sabotage in order to overthrow the Nationalist Party in South Africa, which was a predominantly, or should I say, a Caucasian party consisting of the British and the Dutch who immigrated to South Africa for the purpose of economic aggrandizement and also political gain. So the thing is that the Mkhante Busizwe, they were responsible for the bombing and detonation of various governmental facilities in order to bring about awareness, and not only that, in order to adequately overthrow the government over there. So eventually, after the Sharpeville massacre in 1960 and 1961, with the forming of the Spirit of the Nation, the political, or should I say the military wing of the ANC, with the help of communist dollars, they managed to raise funds throughout Africa, because historically speaking, this was the time of decolonization in Africa, in which various African countries were gaining the self-determination and fighting against European colonialism. So Mandela managed to travel to Algeria, and he received funds from their leader at the time, Mohammed Ahmed Ben Bella, of their Freedom Party, which was going on over there. He managed to go to Egypt, and he received funds from their Prime Minister, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Gandhi Ahmed Sekou Toure, and Ghana Kwame Nkrumah, and various other political leaders throughout Africa, so that they could have the means and resources to adequately overthrow the racialist and racist regime within South Africa. But the thing is that in the early 60s, that was when their headquarters were raided, and Nelson Mandela and 19 other people were incarcerated and awaiting trial. So to fast forward in 1963, Mandela and various others were announced guilty for their 200 plus acts of sabotage, and were eventually incarcerated because they decided to stand up for what they believed in, and they beings, or should I say, self-determination, and should I say self-defense means in order to end the racist regime in South Africa. So during the time of his incarceration, you still had the Umkhonto we Sizwe going on bombing campaigns within that area, and they began to intensify, especially after the Soweto uprising, which occurred in June of 1976, in which you had various students who were protesting against the language requirements, in which the main languages within the educational system were English and Afrikaners, based on the Union of South Africa Act of 1909, in which it was originally English and Dutch. But because of the English and Dutch cohabitating over a certain period of time with the indigenous people of South Africa, that was when the official languages were English and Afrikaner. So the thing is that was, of course, against the best interests of the indigenous people who had their respective languages. So they eventually became a student uprising where there has been an estimation, according to some scholars, of 700 people getting killed, 700 casualties, which is a whole lot of casualties being killed, unfortunately. So the thing is that things started to change within South Africa. And also during the incarceration of Nelson Mandela, going into the 1980s, in the United States, you had President Ronald Reagan. And within his administration, they implemented a program of constructive engagement within South Africa. Because around this time, this was when there were global protests against racism within South Africa. There were global protests, there were a lot of activism and things of that nature, because U.S. corporations and Western corporations were still doing business with South Africa. And of course, when a business goes into another country, in order to capitalize off of the resources, they pay taxes. So when you're paying taxes to another government, what you're doing is solidifying and empowering their infrastructure. And in the case of South Africa, you had corporations like Westinghouse and Coca-Cola in South Africa, and they were paying taxes in order to build prisons, number one, in order to ameliorate and proliferate their military within South Africa, for the purpose of incarcerating, and not only that, subjugating the indigenous people of South Africa. So Desmond Tutu, who became the Nobel Peace Prize winner in the 1980s, that was when he came to Washington, D.C., and he said that, Desmond Tutu was the Bishop of South Africa, the Bishop of Johannesburg. It's a very popular and globally recognized religious leader, especially within the Christian world in Africa. And he said that apartheid in South Africa, and one supporting it, is basically supporting something that is demonic, something that is devilish, something that is ungodly, for that matter. So with that pressure going on, and with Reagan supporting the constructive engagement, and constructive engagement is basically a policy in which there wouldn't be sanctions against South Africa, because he saw that as something that will go against the best interests of the South African people, not just the government, but the people, but instead a gradual process in which the apartheid system will actually end in South Africa, but actually a process is still in which there will be some imposed sanctions. So it's somewhat of an ambiguous process, and the thing is that there were a lot of people in Congress that were against that. So eventually you had the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act that was implemented in 1986, in which there were sanctions imposed against South Africa, and at the same time, you still had the bombing campaigns going on with the military wing of the ANC. So with all that transpiring, this was around the time in which Mandela was about to get set free, because there were a lot of political pressures against South Africa. Their economy and their politics, their political structure was weakening, of course, because of the sanctions. So Mandela was eventually free, but the thing is that his political views may have been the same, we don't know, but the thing is this: he did not have the same fervor that he did prior to his incarceration, because he had the Freedom Charter, of course, and from the Freedom Charter, that was when he said that all of the means of production and all of the land should be redistributed to the people, besides being within the hands of the white elitists, or the white minority within South Africa. So the thing is this: when he came home, that was when he negotiated with ANC leaders and negotiated with the elitists, the economic leaders within South Africa, specifically Harry Oppenheimer, who controlled the price of diamonds throughout the world. Because don't forget, diamonds are a very powerful economic resource, and a very influential economic resource within South Africa, and diamonds were founded in South Africa around the latter part of the 19th century. So the thing is that the bankers of the South African Developmental Bank, Oppenheimer, and various ANC leaders, they began to assemble and meet with one another, and they decided that they were going to implement the neoliberal system in South Africa instead of the socialist system, or a system of redistribution. So the thing is that Mandela eventually, during his election in during the election in 1994, in which he became the president and the vice president became the clerk, was a part of the Nationalist Party. That was when the Mkhonto Wesizwe became co-opted. It was a part of the national military, number one. And number two, a lot of the human rights abuses of the Nationalist Party were eventually forgiven. And number three, the Freedom Charter, a lot of the ideological framework of the Freedom Charter, that eventually became abolished for that matter. So the thing is that in South Africa, with Mandela being the political leader, black people still experience discrimination, because even though black people ascended to political dominance, we were still economically dependent on their leaders in South Africa, who were the grandchildren of people within the Nationalist Party or sympathizers of the Nationalist Party. So the thing is this. We still have a long way to go as far as with social justice throughout the world and also within South Africa. But the thing is that as we celebrate Mandela, we should also remember why he was incarcerated and actually what he stood for as a person. Mandela was, of course, against Western imperialism. He was also against racism, and not only that, even though he was forgiven by a lot of the American elitists, by a lot of European powers, he still had alliances with people like Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of the PLO, the late Yasser Arafat, also Fidel Castro, for that matter. As a matter of fact, during his memorial celebration yesterday, President Obama shook hands with Raul Castro, who was actually in attendance. So the thing is that if we're going to celebrate Mandela, we need to understand that we're celebrating a person that was just not a huggable figure who was like a Santa Claus, according to Dr. Cornel West, but actually a person who was a revolutionary figure who stood up for who he believed in. So the thing is that we need to do a lot of studying, we need to do a lot of researching, and we need to live a life of standing up for what you believe in, education, and also fighting for social justice. And this is the Baruti Libre Show. Take care. Peace.